national monument in our area, rich cultural services and highly educated people, but we kind of lack the packaging of it and putting it forward. And the Sea Otter Classic has helped us do that. And I think others are willing to do that. And I think now's the time where we sit down, we've heard the message, we sit down and we put together the best package we can and then put that package out there and put it forward. We have the airport, we have the resources of the people, the human infrastructure, we have the university and all the expertise around us. Gentlemen, how do you balance exploring natural monuments and its draw? How do you balance this? Expanding national monuments and the draw that they have with who wrote this question down? The other half of it's missing. Is the person out there? Now nobody wants to admit it. So how will visitors enjoy the national monument if they can't find it? There are no signs to direct it. How many of you have been to northern Arizona? Pretty good. Was your first stop in Camp Flagstaff? Starting to drop off a little bit. Tucson? Tucson's the Grand Canyon. That's where the big hotel is. Okay. Most people get lost. And the reason why you go to some of these places is you're looking for an adventure. And so you're exploring it. Here, we don't have directional signs. But if we were to look at the visitors, 87% of them are probably repeat visitors that keep coming back. They know their way around. And we have a high propensity of second homes here. So as Luther was talking about the second home tourism base, we have a lot of second home repeat visitors here. Our interest isn't the second home owner using the national monument or enjoying the Pacific Ocean. It's introducing our assets to new people who will come in here and help us enjoy and expand our economy. We like visitors because they drop their visitor dollars here, but we don't want the visitors to come here and have their dog poop on the Carmel beach, pick it up in a plastic bag, then they leave the plastic bag on the beach instead of carrying it upstairs. We actually want them to respect the area. So I have a question for Jim that's going to lead over to Doug, that's going to lead over to Luther. So, Jim, we have the package, we have the assets here. What we lack is the major developer who has the insight to look at that and could bring the dollars with them. And after you answer that, then I'm going to want Doug to respond to that to say, how could infrastructure and planning help induce the developer that Jim's going to bring?
In today's world, I think this was discussed, Craig, you may have done it yesterday. In today's world, the master developer that's going to come in and spend 20 years developing a project no longer exists. ROIs and financing are based upon 3 to 5 year cycles and based upon very concrete, no pun intended, projects. I think to visualize and think that you're going to have one master developer come in, the Lennars of the world, they all got spanked pretty hard in the 2008, 2010, and their bank said, you know, if you want to be alive next year, you're going to pull back and stop doing these long-range projects. So the answer to the question, I think you don't find one developer. I think FORA may need to find a way to enhance some of these advanced projects to allow individual developers to come in for very small parcels rather than trying to find that master developer that will come in and be the panacea for everything. I just don't think they any longer are in our real world.
To say my piece, yep. Hi. To say my piece about infrastructure, same deal. There isn't a pot of money that's going to build all the streets and all the pipes and all the wires, right? Infrastructure needs to be agile and phased like the development that it follows. I think the moment in time we're at, though, is figuring out how you can, at whatever phase of development goes forward, optimize the infrastructure to get the best out of it. And I think one of the things that the four-door discussion ought to contemplate, there's a movement called EcoDistricts, which is about right sizing and right pricing resources within a specific geographic boundary. And so if you have a known user, a business or something that might like to locate here, they are going to purchase water and energy and heat over 30 years or whatever. With that, you can monetize it and get to a much better outcome. Leave it at that.
Okay, and to add on to that, Doug, how would LEED certified buildings help us build a stronger economy here? And couldn't it, in fact, be a detriment for economic development and jobs?
So the question is about LEED buildings. So people know about LEED? And anybody not? Yeah. Okay. We'll get you later. Buy a cocktail. So the rap on LEED buildings is that they cost more, or that they're perceived to cost more. At their level, certified silver, gold, platinum, I think we're at the point where certified and silver buildings are free if you know what you're doing. That is to say, there's enough cost savings in just being thoughtful about your design to pay for whatever small incremental adjustments you have to do to get to a slightly higher level of performance. At the gold and the platinum, it is definitely a premium investment. What I would say is, you can leverage anything to be a story, right? It's very hard in this day and age to take a LEED silver building in a remote location and put it on a website and have anyone care. It's just not, there's an escalation in performance, and so you have to do something better than that. That would have been a story in 2002. Today it's irrelevant, which is why I included the reference to the One Planet principles. The other one that if you're tired of LEED or you've done LEED for too long, the other one you go to is something called the Living Building Challenge, which is absolutely aspirational and is a premium product as well. But I think if you want a story, that should be a part of the conversation here in this colloquium about setting the bar high. And you can't do it for 43 square miles, but you could do it for a head house building or the visitor center or something that's really high profile and high prominent. That's how to do that.
So thank you, Doug. Some of us have talked as just staff on LEED certification, water recycling, and best practices, with the thought of locating a back office or software company here at Fort Ord that could create 500 jobs. In doing so, because of water and environment, we may want that company to meet some level of environmental certification, LEED, gold, silver, platinum. And part of that is because we have to conserve the water to do that, and we may want to attract another building. And so if we could split that water allocation in half, and if we can set the tone that this type of an area can be attractive, can you have a campus that is the best design and the best environment that attracts another environment that would play off of what Luther was talking about with Richard Florida in the creative class, then we want to attract the creative class. Is that possible?
Well, I think that to put all the elements together, first of all, you have a strong interest in the National Monument being environmentally sensitive. To go with that, you have to marry that to things like LEED buildings or sustainable buildings, and then you marry that with the education system where basically this place can become a center for sustainability. The center would then, all aspects of sustainability, which would include LEED buildings or would include infrastructure. At Lowry, we had a runway to take care of. We actually tore up the runway on site and pulverized the runway and avoided 50,000 truck trips going out of Lowry or coming in with new road-based equipment. These are sustainable practices that you can teach at the education level, you can teach the public at the public level, and you can develop a reputation of being a center for sustainability. I think that's the element where all things tie together.
Okay, so we have a question on branding. and using the national monument, I wanted to ask Luther, and then I'm going to come back with a challenge for all three of you to answer. So, Luther, under branding, what do you suggest we do to brand the use of the ability of the national monuments here to help us attract the knowledge base, the creative class, and also double our tourism?
You're outside of my field, but I'll just reflect a little bit on some experiences I've had. It's very hard, in my opinion, for people. Let me just say this. It's very hard for me at my age to think about how to market to someone who is, 2 or 3 years out of graduate school. But I think that's the crux, is to think about it in terms of what can we do to attract people who are a few years out of grad school, maybe 5 or 10 years out, and they're ready to move from a big tech company to their own startup. And I think you concentrate on social media, you concentrate on advertising things such as walkable neighborhoods, pathways, the brew pub.
Lifestyle is what you're talking about.
It's lifestyle, yeah. I think that's the key. And then the guerrilla marketing part, the part where people don't even realize that it's marketing, but placing ads, placing articles, and a lot of times you can't pay for those, but I'll tell you what I think has had a big impact on the attraction of people is things like when Sunset Magazine does something about the 10 best cities to move to, when there's just an article in a bicycling magazine about how great Fort Ord is for off-season bicycling, or an article about the hiking trails in the further out parts of the county, or the surfing or sea kayaking or whatever the case may be, because authenticity becomes very important. I also think sea otter becomes a great opportunity, not so much to promote tourism, even though you can do that, try to expand sea otter. I was intrigued in Jackson Hole. They have it's kind of odd for Jackson Hole, but they have a snowmobile race in April, which is the lowest occupancy month of the year, and they're pouring local money into expanding that out 3 or 4 days, turning it into not just a weekend, but a seminar and things of that sort. But the people that come to Sea Otter, by and large, are the age you're looking for. I think they're in the late 30s on average. They're the income you're looking for, and many of them could be attracted by some kind of outreach there. So those are just a few kind of quick thoughts.
Okay, Doug?
If I could, branding is something we deal with a lot, and a brand is a promise. Apple Computer, elegant, functional, intuitive. Toyota, reliable, right? So what is the promise of this? I got to reflect on our lunch conversation, which was we sat down and we're breaking bread and getting to know each other, and the first 30 minutes was just terrible stories about how cities can't get along and so doesn't care, and somebody got it in and did a deal and it wasn't So the brand, there's the brand of that a visitor might have as a visitor experience of quick from my desk to the trail or something. There's kind of you can visualize some kind of brand like that. But I got to tell you, there's a bigger thing that's in the room that I haven't had a chance to talk about, which is there's a dysfunction that the collective, the commons can't kind of solve their problem. That you need a parental figure, a bigger government. And I just got to say, I want to ask the question, is the right thing here to have someone from the state, a governor or somebody like that, come in and say, kids, you got to stop, messing up at the dinner table, and I'm going to impose some order here. Isn't that it? I mean, no, because everybody's fighting with each other, and the promise and there's a ton of promise here. I mean, there's a lot. You got a great asset. It's got natural positives it can turn into, but not with all the squabbling. And it's not in the power of the squabblers to fix their squabbling.
So, Doug, what you're saying is we could have a good brand here, but we're leading with a negative message, and the negative message gets heard and gets out first, so we need to stop the negative message and build a positive brand and start leading with the positive brand.
And I agree with Doug on that, but I don't think you need or want to make Fort Ord National Monument a separate brand. people are not going to come to this area to see the Fort Ord National Monument. They're going to come to the Monterey Peninsula. And once they're here, they're going to join in and say, I want to spend a day or I want to spend a few hours biking in the National Monument, perhaps. Or they're going to come here because the lifestyle would be such that once I move to the peninsula, hey, here's a place I want to be nearby because they have biking and they have walking areas. This is not a separate, distinct area from the rest of the peninsula. It's part of a much larger brand, and the brand's already there. You don't need to establish the brand. You just need to include yourself in that brand more positively than what it is now.
So I work with a lot of national site location consultants, and they're very pleased that I'm here in Monterey because they like to visit. And they just basically said what you had said, Jim and Doug, and what Luther's alluding to, and that is, Dave, once you get everything cleaned up there and you got your water worked out and your land use worked out and your image issues worked out, we'd love to come, but we don't think you're ready for us. So I have a question here that says, could we, develop a LEED certified neighborhood? And I'd like to expand that for all three of you. Could we look at attracting the best architects and the best designers to come to Fort Ord to invest, not just to plan and not just to do a charrette, but actually come here as an investment tour and say, okay, what are you willing to put on the table? Here's what I need, and I could go forward because I think you have one of the best environments in the world. In the world. So we're in the top 10, could be world class, and we'll assist. We'll work out a water plan. We'll work out a transportation plan. Is it possible?
So on the LEED neighborhood question, so Victor Dover, who's back in the room, wave your hand, remember from this morning, and I served for 5 years of our lives on the steering committee to write this standard called LEED neighborhood. And it exists, and an opportunity, a huge opportunity to fulfill some of the stuff I was talking about, to bring those model projects forward, is if there's municipal land or Fort Ord land that is prepared to be disposed of or developed in an RFP or RFQ process, is to attach the LEED ND criteria. Now, on one hand, you will get the message to say, oh, you've made it hard for me, or you're raising the bar or adding expense. What I think you'll find is you're just going to filter the market of developers to those who are actually the best. And number one, and number two, insofar as LEED ND is now a national cum global standard, you might actually attract some new faces who have done it elsewhere. And once you've done it, it actually is kind of better than code, because if you've done LEED ND in Maryland or New York or Texas, you know the measures. And so if LEED ND was legal through the codes and ordinances, and I as a developer know how to do that, I show up and it's good for business. It's actually good for business because it's predictability. I know that standard, not your weird local things that are going to throw me for a loop and add cost.
Okay. Jim, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've dabbled in LEED ND and again, back in the military communities of building on active bases. It's a great concept. I think Doug was right. You don't lower the bar or drive yourself down to the lowest common denominator. You say, this is what we're going to do at this location, and you set those standards, and if they don't come tomorrow, you wait until next year, rather than lowering your standards because nobody jumped at your initial fight, because the first project out of the ground is going to set the tone for the ones that follow.
That's right. Okay, I've got a question for our audience. There's a list of the best 100 companies to work for in America. They strive to provide educational training for their employees, moving women up to CEOs, philanthropy, LEED certification, all the best practices. Would you be interested in us targeting the top 10 of the 100 companies to work for in America and inviting them and asking them to come here to Fort Ord? Oh, so that's about 7 people maybe? Okay.
Raise your hand.
Any last thoughts?
Well, I just think the governance issue is the staggering issue for me, right? If you got that sorted out, then the regulations and vision and so on can go forward.
I would, I guess I can't stand not to be last or close to last, but what you need to look at, somebody said yesterday, they were talking about the seventh generation out. All you're doing when you talk about nothing is causing things to be deferred to somebody else's lifetime. So if you talk about the nilts are not in my lifetime, that you don't want something to happen, there's the opposite term, and that's the pressure cooker effect, that the longer you wait to do something responsible, the more pressure there will be to utilize land that's become more scarce, or water that's become more scarce, or open space that's become more scarce, and you'll get perhaps a less quality development than if you move forward responsibly in a shorter span. So the idea of the pressure cooker effect to me is going to build here. If you do nothing, you're going to have more pressure for your grandchildren to do something that may be less good than what you might do today.
That's an interesting point. I'd like to thank our panelists. I'd like to invite President Ochoa to come back up for some closing remarks. I'd like to thank President Ochoa for serving on the Economic Development Committee for Monterey County and for helping arrange this forum or colloquium. A lot to learn from it, a lot to take away, and I know I have my strategic plan to work on and bring back to you all, so I will do that, integrating the thoughts from today.
Well, this has been a very intense 2 days. I want to thank all of you for participating and for our panelists for really providing a lot of stimulating ideas. I do agree with Doug that governance is the elephant in the room. My hope was that by creating an experience where we heard from all the experts around the country, that some of our entrenched ideas and positions might become loosened up by some new information, and that would open up the opportunity for dialogue and constructive moving forward based on the common ground that we all share. And so we are going to explore in the FORA board ways to follow up with, from this event to try to capitalize on this opportunity, this window of opportunity we have now. Thank you.
Okay, so a surprise addition to the agenda for today. Bill Leonards from the Charette Institute has agreed that if there are those of you that want to hear about what might be the next steps in the Charette format, he's willing to work with you here on the side. There'll be cookies and coffee. So for those of you interested in doing that sort of interactive activity, move to the front, because if you're in the back, you won't be able to play. And thank you all for coming. One last round of applause for this panel and for the CSUMB.
Anybody who wants to